Hello guys, this is your friend Multiverse Shinobi 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. What if Chronicles of the Iron Lotus, the Roman Fox and the Spliced Sharingan, Part 1. Chapter 1. The Echoes of Rapture. The salt air of the East China Sea was a far cry from the claustrophobic, pressurized oxygen of rapture. Augustus Sinclair stood on the deck of his newly christened flagship, the Persian Lion, watching the sun rise over a horizon he had once thought lost forever. It had been 2 centuries since the Great Arrival. Sinclair often looked back at the data pads he'd saved, the blueprints of plasmids, the schematics for security bots, and the secret of Atom. When he had crashed into this world's version of ancient Rome, he didn't just survive, he capitalized. He found a dying empire and injected it with the industrial venom of the future. Now, the new Roman Empire was no longer a dream of marble and sandals. It was a juggernaut of steel, steam, and genetic modification. General Drake, Sinclair's voice crackled over the radio, aged but still sharp with that trademark southern drawl. Report from the front. How's our expansion into the elemental nations proceeding? In the land of waves, General Drake adjusted his headset. He stood atop a concrete fortification that looked like a scar on the beautiful coastline. Below him, Roman legionaries in enchanted, atom-infused plate armor marched in perfect synchronization. The bridge is ours, Sinclair, Drake replied, watching the horizon. We've deposed the local tyrant, Gato. The natives are terrified but grateful. But we've made contact with the local power, warriors they call, Shinobi. Shinobi? Huh, Sinclair chuckled. I've read the reports. They use energy called chakra. Sounds like a poor man's atom to me. Keep him close, Drake. If they're as good as the stories say, they'll make fine mercenaries. If not, well, a bullet costs less than a contract. The encounter. On the dusty road leading toward the Great Naruto Bridge, Team 7 stood frozen. Kakashi Hatake had his hand gripped tightly on his kunai, his Sharingan hidden but his senses screaming. In front of them wasn't a squad of thugs or samurai. These were men built like towers, carrying fire spears, long, metallic rifles with bayonets that hummed with electrical blue energy. Who are you people? Naruto Uzumaki shouted, pointing a finger at the lead soldier, Corporal Sacral. This is Tazuna's bridge. What are you doing with those weird machines? Sacral didn't flinch. He looked at the orange-clad boy with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. This bridge now falls under the protection of the Roman Empire, kid. By order of Governor Crocker, all trade routes are being secured for the safety of the populace. The Empire. Sasuke Uchiha stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. I've never heard of any empire in the 5 great nations. That's because we aren't from your nations, a new voice rang out. Shasti, the decanus of the scouting unit, stepped through the ranks of soldiers. Her silver hair caught the light, and her golden eyes locked onto Kakashi. She felt the power radiating from the masked ninja. It was different from Atom, more fluid, but just as dangerous. We are the future, Shasti said, her hand resting on the hilt of a gladius that sparked with electro-bolt residue. And we have a proposal for your Hokage. Kakashi stepped in front of his students. A proposal, or an ultimatum. In Rome, Shasti smiled, a cold, beautiful expression. They are often the same thing. But for now, let's call it a meal. The general is expecting you. As they walked toward the massive, gray fortress that had been erected in mere days, Naruto looked up at a security bot buzzing overhead. It looked like a flying eye with a machine gun attached. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto whispered, his bravado fading. I don't think these guys are from around here. I know, Naruto, Kakashi replied, his eye fixed on the Roman flag, a golden eagle clutching a lightning bolt, flying high above the land of waves. The world just got a lot bigger. And a lot more dangerous. Chapter 2. The Iron Feast. The interior of the Legion headquarters was unlike anything Team 7 had ever seen. While the Hidden Leaf village favored wood, scrolls, and natural aesthetics, the Romans favored efficiency. The walls were made of smooth, gray concrete, lit not by candles or oil lamps, but by flickering, buzzing glass bulbs that emitted a harsh white light. General Drake sat at the head of a long steel table. He had removed his helmet, revealing a face weathered by scars and a gaze that felt as heavy as a mountain. As Team 7 sat down, a group of servers brought out trays of food, thick cuts of salted pork, boiled potatoes, and crusty bread. Eat, Drake commanded, though his tone was surprisingly hospitable. You've traveled far. My scouts tell me the journey from the land of fire is grueling. Naruto didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed a pork chop with his bare hands, only to stop when he saw the fork and knife beside his plate. He looked at Sakura, who was tentatively picking up the silver utensils. It's a professional army, Naruto, Kakashi whispered, his lone eye scanning every corner of the room. Discipline starts at the table. Kakashi turned his attention back to Drake. General, you speak of an empire. You've occupied a sovereign territory in less than a week. In our world, that is an act of war. Drake took a slow sip from a metal chalice. In your world, perhaps. In ours, it is a restoration of order. Gato was a parasite. He strangled the economy of this island and starved its people. We didn't just remove him, we replaced him with infrastructure. Roads, clean water, security. And what happens when you decide the land of fire needs order? Sasuke asked, his voice cold. His hand remained near his tool pouch, his eyes darting toward the two soldiers standing guard at the door. Drake chuckled, a dry sound that lacked any real humor. The Uchiha boy, your eyes, they remind me of the elite plasmid users back in the capital. Always looking for a fight. Drake leaned forward. We have no immediate desire for war with the great villages. We prefer trade. But, we are not naive. We know your daimyo will not appreciate a new power on their doorstep. The power of Adam. As the meal progressed, Naruto's curiosity finally won over his hunger. Hey, General, that thing you did earlier, the ice on your hand. Was that a water-style jutsu? Drake looked at his hand. With a thought, he activated his winter blast plasmid. Tiny crystals of frost began to dance across his skin, and the temperature in the room dropped significantly. Unlike a ninja, there was no hand sign, no gathering of chakra, and no visible effort. It was as if the ice was a part of his very biology. It is not jutsu, Drake explained. It is Adam, a substance discovered long ago by our founder, Sinclair. It allows us to rewrite the genetic code of a human being. We can command the elements as easily as you breathe. Sakura gasped. Rewriting DNA. That's impossible. The medical repercussions alone would be catastrophic. You're observant, girl, Drake nodded. In the early days, it was. People became unstable. Splicers, we called them. But Sinclair spent 2 centuries refining the process. Now, we use stabilized plasmids. It makes every one of my legionaries a match for a mid-level ninja. Kakashi narrowed his eye. He realized the gravity of the situation. A ninja spent a decade mastering a single elemental change. These Romans could simply inject it into their veins and be combat-ready in minutes. If they had an army of thousands, the power balance of the world was already shattered. The scouting order. The door opened, and Shasti walked in. She moved with a feline grace that even the trained ninjas found hard to track. She stood at attention before Drake. General, the scouting unit is ready. We have prepared the supplies and the Atom kits for the journey. Drake turned to Kakashi. Captain Kakashi, I have a request. My decanus, Shasti, is leading a party to the land of fire to establish a diplomatic channel with your Hokage. Since you are headed that way, I suggest you travel together. It would be a gesture of good faith. Kakashi knew he had no choice. Refusing would look like a provocation, and staying here would only delay the vital news he had to deliver to the third Hokage. Very well, General, but my mission is to protect the bridge builder, Tazuna, until his work is finished. The bridge is finished, Shinobi, Drake said, standing up. Our engineers saw to that. Tazuna is home, and Gato is in chains. Your mission is over. Now, a new one begins. As they left the headquarters, the sun was setting. The Roman fort glowed with artificial light, a beacon of cold, hard steel in a world of forests and shadows. Naruto looked back at the massive gates. I have a bad feeling about this, Kakashi-sensei. Me too, Naruto, Kakashi replied. Me too. Chapter 3. The Road to Fire. The march toward the land of fire began at dawn. Unlike the silent, leaping travel typical of shinobi, the Roman unit moved with a rhythmic, heavy iron tread. Shasti led the vanguard, her silver braid swaying against her fitted armor, while Kim and Ron followed closely behind, flanking a mule-drawn cart loaded with glowing blue canisters of Eve and crates of canned rations. Team 7 trailed slightly behind, still adjusting to the sight of soldiers who didn't hide in the shadows. Naruto was restless, his hands behind his head, watching Kim adjust the massive rifle on her shoulder. Hey, big gun girl. Naruto called out. How do you fight with all that heavy stuff? Doesn't it slow you down when you're doing stealth missions? Kim looked back over her shoulder, a smug grin on her peach-colored face. Stealth is for people who can't handle a frontal assault, kid. Why hide in a tree when you can just level the forest with a mortar? That's a very direct philosophy, Sakura noted, eyeing the strange metallic canisters. But what about your energy? Our sensei says chakra is about balance. That atom you use, it feels cold. Artificial. Ron, the blonde soldier who had been struggling with the crates earlier, grunted. It's not about feeling, it's about results. Back in the Empire, we don't have years to sit under waterfalls and meditate. We have cities to build and borders to protect. Atom is just a tool, like a hammer or a wrench. A lesson in efficiency. The group reached a narrow ravine, a notorious spot for bandit ambushes. Kakashi suddenly raised his hand, his body tensing. Wait, I smell movement. 12, no, 15 signatures in the brush above. Before Naruto could reach for a kunai, Shasti didn't even break her stride. She tapped a small device on her wrist, a short-range sonar pulse derived from Rapture's old security tech. Confirmed. Hostiles at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, Shasti said calmly. Kim, suppression. Ron, flush them out. On it, Decanus, Kim replied. She didn't weave a single hand sign. She simply knelt, slammed the bipod of her rifle into the dirt, and pulled the trigger. Thud thud thud. The weapon barked with a terrifying rhythm, spitting lead that tore through the thick oak trees like they were paper. From the other side, Ron raised his hand. A swarm of glowing, golden insects erupted from his sleeve, the swarm bolt plasmid. The bandits' screams echoed through the ravine as the genetically engineered hornets found their marks. In less than 30 seconds, the ambush was over. No jutsu had been shouted. No heroic stances had been taken. It was a clinical, mechanical slaughter. The growing divide. Sasuke watched the scene with a dark intensity. He saw the efficiency of the Roman weapons. If an ordinary soldier can do that much damage without training, he thought, what chance does a ninja clan have against an entire legion? That was kind of overkill, don't you think? Naruto asked, looking at the fallen bandits. Shasti turned to him, her golden eye piercing. In the Empire, we don't believe in fair fights, Uzumaki Naruto. We believe in ending the threat so our people can sleep safely. Your world treats combat like an art form. We treat it like a chore. Kakashi remained silent, but his mind was racing. He noticed that while the Roman soldiers were powerful, they relied heavily on their equipment and their vials. Without Atom, they were just humans in metal suits. But with it, they were something the 5 great nations were not prepared for. We should make camp, Kakashi suggested as the sun dipped below the trees. We're entering the land of fire's primary forests. The terrain won't be as kind to your cart from here on out. Agreed, Shasti said. Ron, set up the security scans. I don't want any artistic surprises in the middle of the night. As the Romans began to deploy floating, mechanical eyes to circle their camp, Team 7 sat by their own small fire. The glow of the Roman electric lamps felt alien against the natural darkness of the woods. The gap between the two worlds was growing wider with every mile they walked. Chapter 4. The Gates of Konoha. The towering trees of the Land of Fire stood like ancient guardians, their leaves whispering secrets of 1,000 years of shinobi history. But the peace of the forest was broken by the mechanical hum of Roman security bots and the heavy, rhythmic clanking of armored boots. As the group reached the main road leading to the Hidden Leaf Village, the massive wooden gates, the Aeon, loomed in the distance. To any ninja, these gates were a symbol of home and safety. To Shasti, they were a tactical obstacle. Halt! Two Chunin guards, Azumo and Katetsu, stepped out from the shadows of the guard station. Their eyes immediately locked onto the Roman unit. They had seen many things, but never soldiers in polished, steam-hissing plate armor carrying metal tubes that crackled with blue electricity. State your business, Katetsu demanded, his hand resting on his sword. And what are those floating machines? The first friction. Shasti stepped forward, her hand notably away from her gladius as a sign of parley, though her presence was no less intimidating. I am Decanus Shasti of the New Roman Empire. We are here as a diplomatic escort for Team 7 and to present a formal petition to your Hokage. Azumo looked at Kakashi, seeking confirmation. The silver-haired Jonin nodded tiredly. It's legitimate, guys. General Drake, their commander in the Land of Waves, sent them. They've shifted the political landscape of the coast. The Land of Waves, Azumo muttered. That's a long way to march just to talk. And what's with the luggage? He gestured to the cart filled with atom canisters and crates. Supplies, Kim interjected, her peach-colored face split by a defiant smirk. And gifts. Unless you want us to starve while your boss decides if he likes us or not. Watch your tone, Katetsu snapped, the air around him thickening with killing intent. The atmosphere turned icy in a heartbeat. Ron instinctively shifted his weight, his hand glowing with a faint green light, the insect swarm plasmid ready to trigger. The two leaf guards took defensive stances, their fingers reaching for shuriken. Stand down. Kakashi's voice rang out with the authority of a veteran. Azumo, Katetsu, open the gates. I will take full responsibility. The Hokage is already expecting a report on the wave mission, though I doubt he expected this. Entering the leaf. As the gates creaked open, the Roman unit marched into the village. The reaction from the populace was instantaneous. Shopkeepers stopped their haggling, children pointed in awe at the flying security bots, and old veterans watched from the shadows with deep-seated suspicion. The contrast was jarring. The Hidden Leaf was a village of earth, wood, and flowing water. The Romans were a vision of steel, oil, and genetic modification. Look at them, Naruto whispered to Sakura. Everyone's staring. It feels like we're bringing a circus to town. Not a circus, Naruto, Sakura replied softly, her eyes on Shasti's back. An army. A very different kind of army. The Tower of the Sun. They arrived at the Hokage's Red Mansion. Shasti ordered her unit to remain outside, but she insisted on bringing a small suitcase, one that bore the mark of Augustus Sinclair. Inside the office, the air was thick with the scent of tobacco. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, sat behind his desk, his wrinkled face unreadable as he observed the silver-haired warrior standing before him. You speak of an empire from across the sea, Hiruzen began, his voice like dry parchment. One that has annexed the Land of Waves in a matter of days. Tell me, Decanus, why should the Land of Fire welcome a neighbor that moves with such aggression? Shasti bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that felt more like a formality than true submission. We did not annex Waves, Lord Hokage. We integrated it. There is a difference. We bring stability, industry, and a power that does not require years of blood-soaked training to master. She placed the suitcase on his desk and flipped the latches. Inside were 3 vials. One red, one blue, and one green. Beside them lay a punch card projector. Our founder, Sinclair, sends his regards, Shasti said. This is a sample of our stabilized atom, along with the blueprints for a thermal power plant. We offer you the future, Hokage. All we ask in return is a formal trade agreement and the right to establish a permanent, Roman quarter, within your walls. Hiruzen looked at the glowing vials, then at Kakashi, who gave a subtle shake of his head. The old ninja knew that this gift was a Trojan horse. If the Leaf accepted this power, they would become dependent on the Empire's supply of Atom. The future is a heavy burden, young lady, Hiruzen said, puffing on his pipe. I shall take your proposal under advisement. But for now, your soldiers will stay in the designated guest barracks. And the flying eyes, they stay grounded. Shasti's golden eyes flashed. As you wish, Lord Hokage. But remember, progress does not wait for advisors to finish their tea. Chapter 5. The Steel Guardian. The guest barracks near the edge of the village felt more like a fortress than a lodging. Shasti had her men working since dawn, not on training exercises, but on maintenance. In the Roman Empire, a soldier's life depended on the hum of a machine and the purity of a vial. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura had been sent by the Hokage to oversee the guests, a polite way of saying they were to spy on them. They found the Romans at the training grounds, but they weren't throwing kunai or practicing taijutsu. What is that thing? Naruto asked, pointing to a massive, hulking suit of rusted metal standing in the center of the field. It looked like a deep-sea diving suit, but larger, reinforced with thick iron plates and armed with a colossal, rotating drill on one arm. It hissed with steam, and a green glow emanated from the small, circular portholes where a face should be. That, Kim said, wiping grease from her forehead, is a bouncer-class protector. Or as the eggheads call it, a Big Daddy. This one's a prototype adapted for land combat. We call him Brutus. A clash of ideals. It looks slow, Sasuke remarked, his hands tucked into his pockets. In a real fight, a ninja would be behind it before it could even turn its head. Metal can't compete with speed. Shasti, who had been observing from the sidelines, stood up. Speed is a resource, Uchiha. But armor is a certainty. Brutus doesn't need to be faster than you. He just needs to be there when you run out of breath. She signaled to Ron, who flipped a switch on a control panel. The massive suit groaned to life, the drill beginning to spin with a terrifying, low-pitched whine that vibrated in the ninjas' chests. Let's have a demonstration, Shasti suggested, her golden eye fixed on Sasuke. A friendly spar. Your Genin speed against our clunky technology. No lethal force, just a test of mobility. Sasuke didn't hesitate. He leapt into the arena, his Sharingan spinning into life. Don't blink, he muttered. The drill versus the leaf. The fight began with a blur. Sasuke moved like lightning, circling the metal giant and throwing a barrage of shuriken. The blades sparked off Brutus's hide, leaving barely a scratch. Sasuke appeared behind the suit, his hand crackling with a half-formed chidori, a test of the armor's conductivity. But as he lunged, the Big Daddy didn't turn. It slammed its drill into the ground, creating a localized tremor that threw Sasuke off balance. Then, the suit did something impossible. It emitted a high-pitched, mechanical roar and charged. For a split second, the massive machine moved with a burst of steam-powered speed that rivaled a Shunshin body flicker technique. Sasuke barely managed to substitute himself with a log before the drill tore through the wood, turning it into splinters in an instant. It's not just metal, Kakashi observed from the fence, his eye narrowing. It's using atom to boost its internal pistons. It's a hybrid of biology and engineering. The warning. The spar ended when Shasti raised her hand. Brutus immediately powered down, the green light in its portholes turning back to a neutral yellow. Sasuke stood at the edge of the field, breathing hard, his ego bruised more than his body. You see, Sasuke, Shasti said, walking toward him. You rely on your bloodline. We rely on our production line. You have to be born special to be a threat in your world. In the Empire, any man with a vial and a suit of armor can stand against a god. That's not strength, Naruto shouted, stepping forward. Strength comes from here. He pounded his chest. Not from some bottle. Is that so? Shasti looked at Naruto, a hint of something, pity, perhaps, in her gaze. We'll see how much your heart matters when the Empire decides that the Land of Fire's resources are better spent on Roman progress. As the ninjas left the training grounds, the sound of the Big Daddy's heavy footsteps echoed behind them. It wasn't just a machine, it was a message. The era of the lone hero was being threatened by the era of the mass-produced soldier. Chapter 6. Shadows and Blueprints. The night in Konoha was never truly silent. The crickets chirped in the woods, and the distant sound of the village stream provided a rhythmic backdrop to the secret movements within the walls. But tonight, a new sound joined the chorus, the low, electronic hum of a long-range Roman transmitter. In the guest barracks, Shasti stood guard outside a heavy iron door. Inside, a small projector cast a flickering blue image of a man sitting in a leather chair, a cigar clutched between his fingers. The atmosphere here is stagnant, Sinclair, Shasti reported to the hologram. They cling to their traditions like a drowning man clings to a rock. The Hokage is cautious, but the one called Kakashi sees the writing on the wall. Augustus Sinclair's voice crackled through the speakers, smooth and predatory. Patience, Shasti. People only change when the old ways stop working. We aren't here to break their doors down, not yet. We're here to offer them the key to a door they didn't even know existed. And the contact? Shasti asked. He's on his way, Sinclair replied, his holographic eyes glinting. The kind of man who understands that progress requires a certain flexibility of the soul. The meeting in the dark. An hour later, a figure emerged from the shadows of the barracks courtyard. He walked with a cane, his arm and right eye swathed in bandages. Danzo Shimura, the leader of Root, did not believe in diplomacy, but he did believe in power. Shasti stepped aside, allowing the old war hawk to enter the room. The holographic image of Sinclair turned to face him. Lord Danzo, Sinclair greeted, his southern drawl dripping with artificial warmth. I've heard you're a man who likes to get things done. A man who understands that a village is only as strong as its secrets. Danzo stared at the flickering light, his expression a mask of stone. You bring weapons that do not require hand signs. You bring a bloodline that can be bought in a bottle. You are a threat to the stability of the shinobi system. Or, Sinclair countered, I am the solution to your village's vulnerability. Tell me, how many of your elite die every year because they ran out of chakra? How many talented children are wasted because they weren't born into the right clan? Sinclair leaned forward, his holographic face enlarging. Imagine an army of Root agents who never tire. Who can summon fire without a breath and lightning without a thought? All provided by the Roman Empire, and managed by you. The forbidden trade. Danzo remained silent for a long time. He looked at the suitcase on the table, the one containing the stabilized atom. The Hokage will not permit this. He fears the corruption of our ways. The Hokage is an old man dreaming of spring, Sinclair said dismissively. You and I are men of winter. I don't need the Hokage's permission to trade with a man of your foresight. I want the scrolls on sealing jutsu. Your methods of containing energy are fascinating. In exchange, I give you the first shipment of combat plasmids and the blueprints for the security bots. Danzo's hand tightened on his cane. He knew the risk. If the Roman Empire gained the ability to seal atom into objects or people using shinobi methods, they would be unstoppable. But if he had their technology, he could finally protect Konoha his way. I will consider your proposal, Danzo said, his voice a low rasp. But if I find your atom to be a leash rather than a tool, I will burn your embassy to the ground. I wouldn't have it any other way, pal, Sinclair grinned. As Danzo disappeared back into the night, Shasti re-entered the room. You're giving him the power to rebel against us, Sinclair. I'm giving him a taste, Shasti, Sinclair replied, the hologram beginning to fade. And the first taste is always free. Once he's hooked on the efficiency of the Empire, he'll be our most loyal customer. After all, what's a little treason between businessmen? Chapter 7. The Spliced Shadow. The Roman Quarter was becoming a reality. Within the village, a small section of the industrial district had been handed over to the Empire's engineers. The smell of charcoal and incense was being replaced by the acrid scent of ozone and burning oil. While the elders debated and Danzo plotted, the younger generation was divided. Naruto spent his afternoon sitting on the roof of Ichiraku Ramen, watching a Roman work crew install a power to the people station near the village's tool shop. "They're changing everything, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said as his teacher appeared in a swirl of leaves. "Change is like the wind, Naruto," Kakashi replied, his gaze fixed on the glowing blue tubes of the machine. "You can try to block it, or you can build a windmill. But these Romans, they aren't just building windmills. They're building a storm." The disturbance. The conversation was cut short by a blood-curdling scream echoing from a nearby alley. It wasn't the scream of someone being attacked, it was a sound of pure, primal agony, followed by a rhythmic, wet thudding. Kakashi and Naruto were moving before the echo died. They leapt into the shadows of the alley, only to find a scene that made Naruto's stomach churn. A low-level chunin, a man Naruto recognized as a frequent customer at the weapon shop, was convulsing on the ground. But his body was wrong. His skin was a sickly, translucent gray, and his muscles were bulging in jagged, unnatural shapes. His eyes were wide, glowing with an unstable red light. "More. I need more," the man shrieked, his fingers clawing at the stone wall with enough strength to shatter the masonry. "Is that a jutsu?" Naruto asked, horrified. "No," Kakashi said, his Sharingan already active. "His chakra is being devoured. Something else is fueling his cells." The man turned, his face twisting into a horrific mask of desperation. He didn't use a kunai. Instead, he snapped his fingers, and a jagged bolt of red lightning erupted from his palm, not the controlled, elegant strike of a shinobi, but a chaotic, exploding burst that leveled a nearby market stall. The Roman response. Before Kakashi could intervene, a heavy metallic clunk sounded from the roof above. Shasti dropped down, followed by Ron. Both were wearing gas masks, their eyes cold behind the glass lenses. "Stay back, Shinobi," Shasti commanded, raising a specialized tranquilizer rifle. "This is Empire business." "What did you do to him?" Naruto yelled. "He's one of us. He's a thief," Ron grunted, his hand crackling with a stabilized green glow. "He broke into our storage and stole an experimental batch of unrefined atom. He didn't have the stabilizers. Now, he's a splicer." The mutated Chunin lunged at Shasti with a speed that defied physics, his bones snapping and reforming as he moved. Shasti didn't flinch. She sidestepped with a grace that felt almost mechanical and slammed the butt of her rifle into the man's neck. As the splicer fell, foaming at the mouth and muttering about the bright lights, Shasti signaled to a group of legionaries who appeared with a heavy containment crate. "The warning sign. We warned the Hokage that Adam is not a toy," Shasti said, turning to Kakashi. She looked at the destroyed market stall, then back at the silver-haired ninja. "Your people are greedy for power they haven't earned. This man is lucky. Usually, the first high is the last thing they ever feel. You brought this poison into our home," Naruto growled, his red chakra beginning to flicker at the edges of his vision. "We brought a tool, Uzumaki," Shasti countered. "If you use a hammer to hit your own head, don't blame the blacksmith." As the Romans hauled the crate away, Kakashi looked at the scratch marks on the alley wall. He saw the truth that Shasti was trying to hide. The splicer hadn't just stolen the atom. He had been looking for a way to fight back against the Roman technology, and in his desperation, he had become the very thing he feared. The Roman fox hadn't just arrived in Konoha. It had started to eat it from the inside out. Chapter 8. The Price of Ambition. The atmosphere in the hidden leaf had shifted from curiosity to a simmering, poisonous dread. The splicer incident in the alley had not remained a secret. Rumors spread through the tea houses like wildfire, tales of a ninja whose soul was consumed by Roman magic, turning him into a mindless demon. For Sasuke Uchiha, the rumors weren't a warning. They were a siren song. He stood on a rooftop overlooking the Roman quarter. While the rest of the village slept, the industrial district was alive with the hum of generators. Sasuke's Sharingan tracked the flow of energy. It wasn't the blue, swirling heat of chakra. It was something colder, a sharp, jagged electrical pulse that felt like a predator's heartbeat. If a common Chunin could gain that much power from a single vial, Sasuke thought, his hand clutching his chest where the curse mark occasionally throbbed, what could an Uchiha do with it? The lion's den. Sasuke descended into the district, moving with the silence of a ghost. He avoided the sweeping spotlights of the security bots and slipped through a ventilation duct into the main Roman laboratory. The room was filled with glass vats. Inside, strange, slug-like creatures, the source of the atom, pulsed with a faint, nauseating light. Looking for a shortcut, kid? Sasuke spun around, a kunai already in his hand. Standing by a desk covered in punch cards was Augustus Sinclair. Except, it wasn't a hologram. It was a man in an expensive, slightly dated suit, leaning back in a chair as if he had been expecting a guest. You're the founder. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. The one who brought this poison here. I prefer the term, innovator, pal, Sinclair smiled, though the light didn't reach his eyes. And you're the one with the tragic backstory. The brother seeker. The boy who wants to kill a god but finds himself stuck in a village of children. How do you know about that? Sinclair makes it his business to know the market, Sinclair said, standing up and walking toward a small, velvet-lined case. You want power. Not the kind you have to work for 20 years to perfect. You want the kind that levels a mountain now. The offering. Sinclair opened the case. Inside sat a single vial of glowing, violet liquid. It looked different from the others, more concentrated, more violent. This is a specialized plasmid, Sinclair whispered. We call it Houdini Alpha. Combined with your Sharingan, it wouldn't just let you see through illusions. It would let you become the illusion. Instant displacement. Physical intangibility. No hand signs. No chakra cost. Sasuke looked at the vial. He could feel the power radiating from it. What's the catch? I saw what happened to that Chunin. That man was a peasant eating at a king's table. Sinclair waved a hand dismissively. Your biology is superior. You have the Uchiha resilience. Of course, there might be a little mental noise. A few voices. A bit of a temper. But isn't that a small price for the head of Itachi? The interruption. Don't do it, Sasuke. Naruto crashed through the skylight, landing awkwardly between Sasuke and Sinclair. He was breathing hard, his orange jacket torn. Naruto, what are you doing here? Sasuke barked. Kakashi-sensei told me to keep an eye on you. Naruto shouted, pointing at Sinclair. This guy is a snake, Sasuke. He's trying to trick you into becoming one of those monsters. Sinclair sighed, looking at Naruto with genuine annoyance. The loud one. Always bad for business. Tell me, boy, does your will of fire provide armor against a .45 caliber round? Because my legionaries are currently surrounding this building. Outside, the heavy thud of a Big Daddy's footsteps began to shake the floor. Sasuke, let's go, Naruto pleaded, reaching out a hand. We don't need this stuff. We're Team 7. Sasuke looked at Naruto's hand, then at the violet vial, and finally at Sinclair's confident smirk. The silence in the lab was deafening, broken only by the spinning of a distant cooling fan. Sasuke reached out, but not toward Naruto. His fingers brushed the cold glass of the vial. I am an Avenger, Sasuke said, his voice dropping to a whisper. And I will take whatever power I need to finish my path. Chapter 9. The Fracture of Team 7. The air in the laboratory grew thick with the smell of ozone. Sasuke's hand trembled as he gripped the violet vial. The reflection of the glowing liquid danced in his black eyes, which were already beginning to shift into the crimson of the Sharingan. Sasuke, stop. Naruto lunged forward, but he was too late. With a sharp flick of his thumb, Sasuke cracked the seal. He didn't hesitate. He slammed the needle-like applicator into his arm. The effect was instantaneous. Sasuke's scream was not human, It was a digital screech that vibrated through the glass vats. His body flickered, turning translucent like a bad television signal. Purple sparks erupted from his skin, and the curse mark on his neck flared a toxic black, trying to compete with the invading atom. Yes, look at that integration, Sinclair whispered, stepping back into the safety of a reinforced alcove. The Uchiha DNA is eating it up like candy. The Roman intervention. The heavy steel doors of the lab hissed open. Shasti stepped in, her gladius drawn and glowing with electro-bolt energy. Behind her, the massive Big Daddy, Brutus, loomed, its yellow portholes turning a violent, aggressive red. Secure the assets, Shasti commanded. The boy has initiated the sequence. He is now a primary Roman interest. He's my friend, Naruto roared. He summoned a dozen shadow clones, but as they charged, Brutus raised its massive drill. With a roar of steam, the machine swung, the centrifugal force creating a vacuum that popped the clones like soap bubbles. He's not your friend anymore, kid, Ron said, appearing from the shadows with a shotgun leveled at Naruto's chest. He's an investment. The ghost of the Uchiha. Suddenly, the flickering image of Sasuke stabilized. He stood in the center of the room, but he looked different. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes weren't just red, they had a violet ring around the pupil. I can see everything, Sasuke whispered. His voice sounded like two people speaking at once. One of the Roman legionaries moved to grab his shoulder. Without looking, Sasuke leaned back. He didn't just move, he teleported 6 inches to the left, leaving a purple afterimage behind. Before the soldier could react, Sasuke touched the man's chest. Houdini. Combustion, Sasuke muttered. A blast of purple flame erupted from the soldier's armor, throwing him across the room. There was no hand sign. No great fireball chant. Just a thought made manifest by the plasmid. The conflict escalates. Sasuke, you've got to stop. You're hurting people, Naruto yelled, his own blue chakra beginning to swirl into the shape of a Rasengan. Sasuke turned to Naruto, a cold, distant look in his eyes. You don't understand, Naruto. This is the only way to catch him. Your friendship is a shackle. This is freedom. Enough talk, Shasti said, her patience at an end. Brutus, subdue the Uchiha. Do not damage the eyes. The Big Daddy let out a mournful, metallic groan and charged. The floorboards buckled under its weight. At the same time, Naruto leapt toward Sasuke, desperate to pull him away from the madness. The lab became a chaotic battlefield of fire, steam, and shifting shadows. In the corner, Sinclair watched the data screens with a satisfied grin. He had what he wanted. A live test of the Uchiha bloodline merged with Roman technology. But outside, the sound of the battle had alerted the rest of Konoha. Kakashi and a squad of Anbu were already descending on the district. The Roman quarter was no longer a place of trade, it was a powder keg that had finally exploded. Chapter 10. The Night of Red Snow. The industrial district was no longer a part of Konoha, it was a hellscape of steam and neon. The orange glow of burning crates clashed with the clinical blue of Roman electrical fires. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, landed atop a warehouse roof. His golden battle robes fluttered in the hot wind generated by the Roman turbines. Behind him, a dozen Anbu operatives crouched, their porcelain masks reflecting the chaos below. Hokage-sama, Kakashi appeared at his side, his flak jacket scorched. It's a disaster. Sasuke has integrated a high-level Roman plasmid. He's unstable, and the Romans are trying to reclaim him like a piece of lost equipment. Hiruzen looked down. Below, Brutus, the Big Daddy, was locked in a titanic struggle with a giant toad summoned by Naruto. The sound of the drill grinding against the toad's iron-bound shield echoed through the village. Sinclair has overstepped, Hiruzen said, his voice low and dangerous. He was a guest. Now, he is an invader. The Legion's wall. At the entrance to the Roman quarter, the Legion had formed a testudo formation. But this wasn't a formation of wooden shields. These were translucent, glowing barriers of kinetic shielding. Every time an Anbu threw a fireball or an exploding tag, the barrier absorbed the energy, glowing brighter with every hit. Hold the line, Shasti shouted, her silver hair whipping around her face. She raised her hand, and a massive bolt of chain lightning leapt from her fingertips, arcing through 3 Anbu and sending them crashing into the canal. You're fast, Shinobi, Kim yelled from a clock tower, her sniper rifle barking. But you can't outrun a bullet. The ghosts escape. In the center of the lab, Sasuke was a blur of violet light. He was no longer fighting like a ninja. He would vanish in a puff of purple smoke and reappear behind a Roman soldier, his hand wreathed in a mixture of Chidori and combustion flames. Sasuke, look at me, Naruto screamed, struggling to stand as the heavy gravity of the room, a side effect of the experimental machines, weighed him down. Sasuke paused. His face was a mask of cold, calculating power. One of his eyes had begun to bleed, the Sharingan struggling to process the rapid-fire data of the plasmid. Naruto, I can see the threads of the world, Sasuke said, his voice echoing. The Empire is just a tool. This village is just a cage. I'm going to find Itachi, and I'm going to use their own fire to burn him. I won't let you leave like this. Naruto lunged, but Sasuke simply stepped back into a shadow. You can't catch a ghost, Naruto. The turning point. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the district. Danzo Shimura and his root agents had finally made their move. But they weren't attacking the Romans. They were seizing the atom vats. The transition is complete, Sinclair's voice boomed over the village intercoms. Lord Danzo has realized that the old ways are dead. The new Roman Empire and Root are now partners in the future of Konoha. Hiruzen's eyes widened. Danzo, you fool. The Roman flagship, the Persian Lion, began to rise from the waters of the Land of Waves, its long-range cannon swiveling toward the hidden leaf. The diplomatic mission was over. The occupation had begun. Sasuke used the distraction to leap over the village wall, disappearing into the dark forests of the Land of Fire. He was a new kind of monster, the first spliced Uchiha. Chapter 11. The Empire's Shadow. The morning sun did not bring its usual warmth to the hidden leaf. Instead, it glinted off the polished hulls of security bots that now patrolled the streets in pairs. The Roman quarter had expanded overnight, its gray concrete walls pushing further into the heart of the village. The Land of Fire was no longer sovereign. With Danzo Shimura controlling the atom vats and General Drake's fleet looming off the coast, a soft occupation had settled over Konoha. Roman flags, the eagle and the lightning bolt, flew alongside the swirling leaf symbol. The resistance in the rain. In the basement of a nondescript apartment, Naruto, Sakura, and Kakashi sat around a low table. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and the metallic tang of Roman machinery. They've closed the gates, Sakura whispered, her hands trembling as she looked at a map of the village. No one leaves or enters without a genetic scan. If your atom levels aren't registered with the Empire, they mark you as a potential splicer and throw you in the holding cells. It's not just the Romans, Kakashi added, his voice gravelly. Danzo's root agents are now using target decoy and enrage plasmids. They aren't just ninjas anymore, they're biological weapons. The Hokage has been asked to remain in his tower for his own protection. In reality, he's a prisoner. Naruto slammed his fist onto the table. I don't care about their machines or their bottles. They took Sasuke, they took the old man, and they're turning our home into a factory. We have to fight back. We can't just charge in, Naruto, Kakashi warned. Not against the big daddies. We need a way to neutralize the atom. If we can't cut off their power, we're just throwing lives away. The scavengers hope. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked. The group tensed, weapons ready, but it was only Shasti. She was without her helmet, her silver hair matted with grease, and her golden eye looked tired. Don't kill me yet, she said, raising her hands. I'm not here on Legion orders. Why should we trust you? Naruto growled, the fox's chakra flickering in his eyes. You're the one who brought them here. I brought a civilization, not a circus of horrors, Shasti snapped. Sinclair has lost control of the distribution. Danzo is overclocking the vats. He's creating splicers on purpose to build an army that doesn't fear death. Even my own men are starting to look at the unrefined Adam with greedy eyes. She threw a small, copper-bound notebook onto the table. It was Augustus Sinclair's private journal from his time in Rapture. There's a way to create an anti-Adam strain, Shasti explained. An enzyme that can neutralize the plasmids in a person's system. If we can get into the central lab and inject this into the main vats, the Roman technology becomes just scrap metal. The plan. Kakashi picked up the notebook. The central lab is in the middle of the root headquarters. It's guarded by a bouncer-class Big Daddy and a squad of Adam-enhanced root agents. Then we divide them, Shasti said. Naruto, your loud style is perfect. You cause a riot at the Roman quarter's main gate. Draw out the legion. While they're busy, Sakura and I will use the old sewer lines, built by our engineers, ironically, to get into the lab. Kakashi, you deal with the Big Daddy. And what about Sinclair? Sakura asked. Sinclair is a businessman, Shasti said coldly. When he sees the profit margin dropping to zero, he'll flee back to the land of waves. But Danzo won't stop until he's the only one left standing. Naruto stood up, a new resolve in his eyes. Tonight, we show them that the hidden leaf doesn't need a bottle to be strong. We're going to break their machines. As the resistance prepared their gear, the sound of a distant, mechanical roar echoed through the village, the sound of a Big Daddy being fueled for the coming night. Chapter 12. The Veins of the Village. The sewers of Konoha, once simple stone tunnels for rainwater, had been transformed. Under the Empire's modernization, they were now a labyrinth of copper pipes, hissing steam vents, and glowing blue conduits. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur and the hum of high-voltage machinery. Sakura moved through the knee-deep water, her medical nin training allowing her to keep her footsteps silent despite the splashing. Beside her, Shasti moved with a predator's grace, her gladius held low. The root laboratory is directly beneath the Hokage's monument, Shasti whispered, her voice echoing off the damp walls. Danzo tapped into the natural geothermal vents to power the atom purifiers. If we hit the pressure valves, the whole system will back up. The shadow in the steam. Suddenly, Shasti pulled Sakura into a darkened alcove. From the mist ahead, a figure emerged. It wore the porcelain mask of a root Anbu, but the mask was cracked, revealing skin that pulsed with a rhythmic, neon blue light. The agent didn't use a sword. Instead, his right arm had been surgically replaced with a high-pressure chemical thrower, connected to tanks of liquid nitrogen. A spliced root agent, Sakura breathed, her heart hammering. He's been enhanced with winter blast technology. The agent didn't speak. He raised his arm, and a blast of absolute zero mist filled the tunnel. The water at Sakura's feet turned to solid ice in a heartbeat, pinning her in place. Go! Shasti shouted, shoving Sakura toward the maintenance ladder. I'll handle the cold blood. You get to the vats. The strength of the leaf. As Shasti engaged the agent in a flurry of sparks and steel, Sakura climbed into the sub-basement of the laboratory. She was met by two more root guards. They moved with the jerky, unnatural speed of speed freak plasmids. I'm not the same girl who waited for Sasuke to save her, Sakura muttered to herself. She focused her chakra into her fist, but she did something different. She timed her strike to the rhythmic pulse of the Roman generators. As the guard lunged with a poison tanto, Sakura slammed her fist into the concrete floor. Cherry blossom impact. The floor didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The shockwave, amplified by the rigid Roman foundations, sent the guards flying into the heavy machinery. Sakura didn't stop. She dashed toward the central vat, a massive glass cylinder filled with the raw, swirling essence of Adam. The sabotage. She pulled out the vial of anti-Adam enzyme Shasti had given her. It was a pale, milky substance that looked fragile compared to the glowing poison in the vat. Stop right there, girl. From the shadows of the machinery, Danzo Shimura emerged. He looked younger, his skin smoother, his movements fluid. He had discarded his bandages, revealing an arm encrusted with glowing atom-infused seals. You would destroy the greatest evolution in our history? Danzo asked, his voice a smooth, resonant baritone. With this, the Leaf will never fear another invasion. We will be the masters of the world. At the cost of our humanity. Sakura countered, her hand hovering over the vat's intake valve. You're not protecting the village, Danzo. You're just building a bigger cage. Danzo raised his hand, and a swarm of murder of crow's plasmids erupted from his sleeve, a dark cloud of talons and feathers screaming toward her. Sakura closed her eyes, focusing every ounce of her chakra. She wasn't fighting a ninja, she was fighting a machine. And machines had a breaking point. Chapter 13. The Battle of the Gate. The main gate of the Hidden Leaf, once a symbol of welcome, had been reinforced with steel plating and mounted with sentry turrets that swiveled with a predatory click-clack. Above, the sky was choked with the black smoke of Roman furnaces. Hey, over here, you bucket heads. Naruto stood atop the statue of the first Hokage's head, waving his arms wildly. Below him, hundreds of shadow clones emerged from the woods, each one carrying a glowing decoy scroll that mimicked the energy signature of a high-level atom stash. The security bots reacted instantly. Their sirens wailed, a high-pitched woo-woo that signaled the entire legion to mobilize. Target acquired, the mechanical voice of a bot droned. Engagement protocol. Lethal. The Legion's might. General Drake stepped out from the fortified command post. He wasn't wearing his formal cape anymore. He was encased in a suit of Delta Series power armor, a massive brass and iron monstrosity that hissed with pressurized steam. In his right hand, he carried a heavy machine gun. In his left, the air crackled with a permanent electro-bolt hum. You're persistent, Uzumaki, Drake's voice boomed through the suit's external speakers. But you're fighting the tide. Rome is inevitable. I don't know what inevitable means, Naruto shouted, his blue chakra beginning to swirl into a massive Rasengan. But I know what get out of my house means. Naruto and his clones charged. It was a clash of eras. On one side, the ancient art of ninjutsu, on the other, the industrial brutality of the Empire. Drake opened fire, the heavy lead rounds tearing through clones in a spray of white smoke. But for every clone that popped, two more took its place. Legionaries. Incinerate formation. Drake commanded. A line of Roman soldiers raised their palms. A wall of fire, fueled by concentrated atom, erupted across the battlefield. It wasn't the rhythmic, great fireball of a ninja, it was a continuous, flamethrower-like stream that turned the grass to ash in seconds. The fox and the machine. Naruto felt the heat singeing his skin. He felt the fox's power bubbling up, but he held it back. He had to be the distraction, not the disaster. Now, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto signaled. From the trees, Kakashi and a squad of elite Jonin descended. They didn't target the soldiers, they targeted the security hubs. With surgical precision, Kakashi used his lightning blade to sever the power cables connecting the turrets to the village grid. Drake, look at your machines now. Naruto yelled, leaping through the smoke with a Rasengan aimed directly at the general's chest plate. Drake didn't dodge. He activated his ironskin plasmid. The Rasengan hit with the force of a falling star, but the armor only dented. Drake grabbed Naruto by the throat, the metal fingers of his gauntlet crushing the boy's windpipe. You have spirit, boy, Drake growled, raising his machine gun to Naruto's head. But spirit doesn't stop a .50 caliber bullet. A sudden shift. Just as Drake was about to pull the trigger, the lights across the Roman quarter flickered. The sirens of the security bots shifted from an aggressive red to a confused, stuttering yellow. In the distance, beneath the Hokage monuments, a low-frequency vibration shook the ground. The vats. Drake muttered, his grip loosening. What has that girl done? The Roman technology was dying. The anti-atom enzyme was beginning to spread through the veins of the village. Chapter 14. The Collapse of the New Age. The laboratory beneath the Hokage monuments groaned like a dying beast. The anti-atom enzyme had hit the central vats, and the reaction was violent. The once steady blue glow of the pipes turned a sickly, pulsating purple before flickering out entirely. Steam hissed from ruptured valves, and the smell of ozone was replaced by the stench of decaying organic matter. In the center of the room, Sakura stood her ground, her breathing ragged. She watched as the glowing seals on Danzo's arm began to smoke and blacken. No. The power. I can feel it slipping. Danzo roared. He clutched his arm, which was now swelling in jagged, uneven lumps. Without the stabilization of the Roman machinery, the massive amounts of atom he had injected were turning against his biology. It's over, Danzo, Sakura said, her voice steady despite the chaos. The Empire's future was a lie. It was just another way to control people. The mutated shadow. Danzo didn't listen. His eyes turned a clouded, milky white. If I cannot lead this village into the new age, then I will be the one who ends the old one. He lunged, but it wasn't a ninja's strike. His arm elongated, the flesh twisting into a mass of tentacles and metallic shards, a horrific fusion of a splicer's mutation and the mechanical remnants of Roman tech. Sakura dodged, the ground where she had stood being obliterated by a blast of unstable telekinesis. She realized that Danzo was no longer a man, he was a living reactor meltdown. Every time he used a power, his body tore itself further apart. The falling ceiling, the vibrations from the failing generators were destabilizing the very foundation of the monument. Dust and massive stone slabs began to rain down from the ceiling. Shasti, we have to go, Sakura yelled toward the doorway. Shasti appeared, her armor dented and her gas mask shattered. She looked at the mutating Danzo with a mixture of disgust and professional disappointment. He's gone into total cellular collapse. In 3 minutes, this entire sub-level will be a crater. We can't leave him like this. Sakura cried, but she knew there was no healing this. The atom was rewriting Danzo's DNA faster than any medical jutsu could repair it. Suddenly, a heavy, metallic hand slammed into the wall beside them. It was Brutus, the Big Daddy. Its portholes were flickering between red and yellow, its internal system struggling to stay online without a central signal. It let out a low, mournful groan, a sound of a protector who no longer had anything to protect. The final stand. The Big Daddy, it's holding up the support beams, Shasti realized. It's giving us a chance to get out. Sakura looked at the massive machine. It was a product of the Empire, but in its final moments, it was acting with more honor than the man who had tried to steal its power. Let's move. Sakura grabbed Shasti's arm, and they bolted for the emergency ladder just as Danzo let out one final, world-shaking shriek. A massive discharge of purple lightning erupted from his body, striking the central vats. As Sakura climbed, she looked back one last time. She saw Brutus, the Iron Giant, standing firm against the collapsing ceiling, a silent sentry in the dark. Then, the world turned white. Chapter 15. Ashes of the Empire. The explosion was muffled by the earth, but the shockwave sent a tremor through the entire hidden leaf. In the industrial district, the security bots fell from the sky like dead birds. The sentry turrets slumped, their barrels smoking. General Drake felt the power in his suit die. The heavy brass plates became a coffin of dead weight. He looked at Naruto, who was standing over him, his fist still glowing with the fading remnants of a Rasengan. Your toy is broken, Naruto said, his voice quiet. Drake let out a weary laugh through the helmet. So it is. Sinclair was right about one thing, you people are stubborn. But don't think this is the end. The Empire is a machine, Uzumaki. You've only broken one gear. The departure. By the time the smoke cleared, the Roman flagship, the Persian Lion, was already retreating toward the horizon. Augustus Sinclair was no fool. He knew when a venture had become a liability. He had taken his blueprints, his films, and his remaining atom, leaving his allies to rot in the sun. The Roman quarter was silent. The legionaries who remained were stripped of their armor and placed in detention. The village was scarred, buildings were replaced by concrete shells, and the smell of oil would linger for years, Lekina Konoha, but Konoha was free. The empty path. Days later, at the village gates, Naruto, Sakura, and Kakashi stood looking out at the road. The Roman flags had been torn down, replaced by the red swirls of the leaf. We won, Sakura said, but her voice held no joy. But at what cost? Danzo is dead, the village is a mess, and Sasuke is still out there. He's out there with that purple fire in his veins, Naruto said, clutching his forehead protector. The Romans gave him what he wanted. Now, he's faster and stronger than any of us. He's a splicer, Naruto, Kakashi said solemnly. He's carrying the curse of two worlds now. Our mission hasn't changed. We have to bring him back before the atom eats what's left of his heart. I will, Naruto promised, looking at the distant horizon where the sea met the sky. I don't care if I have to break every machine Sinclair ever built. I'm bringing my friend home. Epilogue. The Fox and the Sea. Far across the ocean, in the golden city of the new Roman Empire, Augustus Sinclair sat in his office. On his desk was a new punch card. It contained the data from Sasuke's transformation, the first successful fusion of a Sharingan and a plasmid. Losses were acceptable, Sinclair whispered to the empty room. The market is expanding. And next time, we won't bring a diplomat. We'll bring a fleet. He took a sip of his drink and looked out at the city of marble and steel, where the sun never truly set on the Roman Fox.